It was a long time coming. His nomination was approved by a bipartisan vote of 15-7. I'm not surprised. He is superbly qualified to be the next Attorney General of the United States. Experience, judgment, integrity, he checks all the boxes. He served with distinction on the D.C. Circuit Court for 23 years, and in that time, developed a reputation for fidelity to the rule of law, strict adherence to judicial independence, and a commitment to treat people with fairness, dignity, and respect. It's no surprise that he's been endorsed by 60 former federal judges and by judges, of course, who've been appointed by presidents of both political parties. In addition to his experience on the bench, he is a longtime veteran of the Department of Justice, where he served before he ascended to the D.C. Circuit. He's uniquely qualified at this moment in history to lead the department, to investigate and prosecute, for example, the January 6th insurrection, the mob that invaded this Capitol building. The reason he's qualified is he led the investigation and prosecution of the Oklahoma City bombing. We remember that very well. That was clearly a case of domestic terrorism. His work on that project won praise from across the political spectrum. He also personally understands the department's role in protecting civil rights. I believe he's the person to restore honor and dignity to this department. He has support from every major law enforcement organization in the country, 150 former Justice Department officials of both parties, the nation's leading civil rights organizations, and many others, left, right, and center. His credentials are second to none. And his character in particular, his selflessness, is a model to us all. When we held the markup in the committee on his nomination, the most significant witness may have been a lady by the name of Mrs. Butler. She testified in the second panel. She's the mother of 2 D.C. public school students who have been tutored and mentored by Judge Garland. After her first child had received his helping hand for several years, the second child asked if he could be included in the next round, and then they both wanted the help of Judge Garland. Doesn't it speak volumes of a man who's reached that station in life, that he would be so humble as to sit down and help children he'd never met before find their way through life? It was a touching moment when she testified. It really was an insight into his character. So you'd think with 15-7 vote, you'd think with all these endorsements, you think with the fact that 4 members of the Republican side of the Senate Judiciary Committee behind him, that this would be a nomination so important to this nation of an Attorney General that would be given expedited treatment on the floor of the Senate. Nope. Unfortunately, there was an objection to expediting his nomination so he could get to work at the Department of Justice. And as a consequence, we face the Senate procedure, which means that it could be days, maybe even into next week, before he can take the job. That's unfortunate. We need him now more than ever. Even Republican leader Mitch McConnell has said he would support him. Chuck Grassley, my friend and the ranking member in the Senate Judiciary Committee, he voted for him. There's just no reason why the Senate should not immediately hold a vote for Merrick Garland's nomination. He is the last remaining member of President Biden's national security team to be chosen. It's time for him to take this job. The Attorney General is needed to fight the threat of domestic terrorism, which the FBI director spoke to yesterday in the Senate Judiciary Committee, to reorganize this department and get it moving in the right direction, and to face the many challenges when it comes to national security and the administration of justice. we should confirm Merrick Garland immediately. I sincerely hope that whoever is holding his nomination on the other side can be persuaded to give him his chance. Mr. President, I'd like to speak to a different subject and ask that it be placed in a separate part of the record.
Without objection.
I listened to the speeches, Mr. President, of Senator Schumer, Senator McConnell, about the American Rescue Plan, Joe Biden's proposal, his initial proposal as president, to deal with the pandemic, the state of the economy, and many other aspects of American culture and life that need to be addressed. And clearly there's a difference of opinion. I couldn't help but think, as Senator McConnell was recounting our experience last year, that when it came to the CARES Act, a year ago, the $2 trillion plan to respond to the state of the pandemic and the economy, the plan that was engineered by Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, a member of the Trump administration, and bargained and negotiated with Republicans and Democrats alike, that when they finally agreed, the vote was 96-0 in this chamber. Every Democrat voted for the proposed CARES Act that was engineered by the Trump administration. Party was pushed aside because the priority was our nation. Happened again in December of last year. President Trump's administration, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin at the table, Democrats and Republicans bargaining, the final vote 92-6 in the Senate. Not bad. And the 6 noes were all Republicans. Again, the Democrats stepped up and said, we will support this bipartisan effort because that's why we're here. The American people sent us here to do a job. Now comes the new president, Joe Biden, and says, good work last December, but that was temporary, and that was supposed to be a special effort. Now we've got to finish the year. We've got some deadlines coming. Just 2 weeks from now, less than 2 weeks, the unemployment insurance programs will be running out for millions of Americans. And the rental assistance program as well. Some will face eviction, some will not have enough money to feed their families, so get to work. Pass the American Rescue Plan on a bipartisan basis. We have yet to hear one Republican senator who will support President Biden's plan. Some of them have legitimate differences with his policy, and I wish they would come to the table and be part of the conversation, but none of them has really stepped up and said, we're in for the big effort that the president's calling for. That's what it will take. And unfortunately, because of that, in a 50-50 Senate, we will need every Democratic senator to support the president's plan and to pass a version of what the House is sending over to us. We'll go through an exercise called reconciliation in just a few days. It's not a pretty scene if you follow legislative history, but it's long overdue. And do you know the one thing that should drive us on is not only the obvious need for this, but the fact that the American people overwhelmingly support what President Biden proposed. The American people believe, as he does, that we should be investing billions into more vaccines and more people to administer them. The American people believe that a cash payment to families is essential in some parts of this country. They'd like to see the $600 in last December's bill complemented with $1,400 in this proposal. They'd like for us to put money on the table for people who are unemployed so they can put food on that same table. And they'd like for us to get the schools ready to deal with reopening in classes that are safe for the kids and the teachers. There's no argument about that. 20% of people may oppose it, but 80% support it. And yet we can't find one Republican senator to support President Biden's plan. They say it costs too much. Well, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Mr. Powell, a conservative Republican economist, has told us, be careful that you do too little. This economy is fragile. It needs to be strengthened. We need to inject into this economy enough of our resources so that people are back purchasing again and businesses are reopened. He's warned us, if you do too little and you cut it off too soon, you're going to pay for it for years to come with unemployment and problems with the sluggish economy. My Republican colleagues say it's just too much money. Well, I think they're wrong. And at this moment in history, I'm prepared to err on the side of investing in the American people and American businesses and making certain that we have a fighting chance to put this behind us. Our constituents know about the cost of this situation. They want us to provide the solutions. They want results from Congress. If we were to delay this payment, people would see their unemployment insurance lapse and hardships continue. We shouldn't play politics with it either. In the two big bills last year, the Democrats were on board for plans engineered by the Trump administration. Economists believe that we need to move decisively. According to an analysis by the Brookings Institution, passing a comprehensive plan like the American Rescue Plan could produce a 4% growth in U.S. GDP this year. Moody's estimates that passing the same plan would create 7.5 million American jobs. How about that? We got good news over the weekend with the arrival of another safe and effective vaccine. This is the third one, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in our arsenal, perhaps more to follow. It holds the promise of finally getting America inoculated, vaccinated, and breaking the back of this pandemic. This new vaccine prevents hospitalizations and deaths, stored at normal temperatures, a single shot, all good news. But we need more than a promise of a vaccine. We need a plan. These vaccines are of no good to us sitting on a shelf or not being produced in volumes necessary. President Biden's rescue plan, which not a single Republican supports, would provide and I think I got the number right, $160 billion in resources for the production of vaccines and the distribution. If we ever needed it, this was a moment. Thankfully, President Biden's leadership has led to allocations to Illinois of vaccines that have increased by 70% since he took over as president. We still have our challenges at the local level. I want to salute the governor, J.B. Pritzker, the mayor of the city of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, the Cook County Board President, Preckwinkle, and all the others who are doing their best. I announced with Senator Duckworth just last Friday that we're going to put a new facility in the parking lot of the United Center where the amazing Chicago Bulls play basketball from time to time. And it's going to be able to vaccinate thousands of people every single day. It's federal assistance that's making it happen. And it happens to be in a neighborhood where African Americans and Latinos are nearby, and we need to protect them with even more effectiveness than we have to date. They account for 33% of the population of that area, and only 16% have been vaccinated. The American Rescue Plan provides $20 billion to expand our vaccine distribution capacity. You would think that that would maybe attract one Republican supporter. It should. There are certainly some who argue against all vaccines and spending any money for it and all the rest, but they are such a small minority. The vast majority of Americans of both political parties understand that we've got to go to vaccinations as quickly as possible. The Biden Rescue Plan does that. I wish they would join us in supporting it. There's also a need for money for education. There's $128 billion in this bill for additional education funding, K through 12. And there's been arguments made on the floor here by the Republicans that we just don't need it. They point to data showing that school districts haven't spent the money that we provided in previous relief packages. Well, just talk to the principals and teachers in your home state about that conclusion. You'll find the money is desperately needed, and that the money that has been appropriated before will be spent in an orderly way and not shoveled out the window. We are looking ahead to the entire year and making certain that we have a real school year, perhaps in the remainder of this year, but certainly for next year. Illinois needs these funds, and America does. When it comes to state and local support, I have to tell you, we've paid a heavy price in our state of Illinois and our major cities. We've seen expenses go up, and we've seen revenue go down, and we need help. Not unreasonable. This helping hand will save jobs that are necessary for us, some of them healthcare jobs, some of them security and safety jobs, but they'll save jobs, and that's why the state and local resources included in this bill are so important and timely. Over the past year, states and localities have lost 1.3 million jobs of their payrolls, far more than the 750,000 lost in the Great Recession. There's needed help from the federal government, and it's needed now. We've recovered just 12 million of the 22 million jobs we've lost since the start of the pandemic. According to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, more than 8 million rental households and 2 million homeowners were behind on housing payments at the end of last year. The burden is tough, and for those of us lucky enough to have escaped it, we may not know the feeling, the empty feeling of addiction or the loss of a home that you paid a mortgage on for years. I'm going to close. I see one of my colleagues on the floor preparing to speak, but I'd like to close with the story of Galen Hinson from Midlothian, Illinois. For 34 years, Galen has supported touring artists through his work in live concert production for some of America's most iconic musicians. When the American economy was upended by pandemic, his industry froze to save other lives and to avoid crowds. Like so many others, Galen went on unemployment. Yet even with the federal $600 supplement to state unemployment, he had only half of his regular income replaced. He struggles, still struggles, to make ends meet. He wrote to me urging that we put aside our partisan differences and pass the American Rescue Plan. Let's listen to Galen, and let's listen to many others like him. They're counting on us. I hope when all is said and done, after all the speeches, that just as we came together on a bipartisan basis to pass the rescue plan twice last year, 96-0, 92-6, under the Trump administration, with all Democrats supporting it, wouldn't it be great if we showed that same bipartisanship again? I yield the floor.
Democratic Whip.
Mr. President, I have 7 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate with the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.